Good day, everyone. I'm Gush, and this is another episode of Going Beyond the Surface. You have tried to change, you have prayed about it, you have done the inner work, you have read the books, listened to the podcasts, sat with the shame, and made the decision more than once. And still, there is this thing that you're not able to let go of. A pattern you keep repeating, a fear that will not leave, a way of relating to people that you did not even like in yourself, but cannot seem to stop, a drive that pushes you forward, but empties you at the same time. And the question underneath all of it is the same. Why can't I change this about myself? Why can't I change this about myself? Why am I being blocked? I want to offer you something today that changed everything for me when I finally understood it. Some of what you are carrying did not start with you. Not the striving, not the fear, not the need to give endlessly while finding it almost impossible to receive. Not the way you show up in relationships, not the patterns that keep repeating, no matter how much work you do on yourself. Some of it was handed down to you before you had words for it, before you had a choice, before you even knew there was something to choose. Today, we talk about that intergenerational trauma, what it actually is, why it happens, why you may not even know it was the thing holding you back, and what you begin to do about it. So this is the second episode of the Blocker series that we are now going through. And it's called You Are Not Broken, Your Inherited Intergenerational Trauma and Why You Cannot Seem to Move Forward. So you are not broken. I want you to hear that. You are not broken, you are inherited. It's intergenerational trauma and why you cannot seem to move forward. That is what we're going to be unpacking today, with the hope that at the end of this video, you will understand what intergenerational trauma is and you will work towards healing through it. And like I've said many times, the only time you can heal through something is when you've actually identified it, when you've actually understood what it is. So I'm going to share a bit of my own story to you. I grew up watching my mother working long hours, always pushing, always looking for ways to better her circumstances, always reaching for the next thing that would bring more stability, more security, more ground beneath her feet. She was not chasing success for the sake of ambition. She was chasing safety. And I watched her do it my entire childhood without ever fully understanding what I was absorbing. I just saw her struggle. When I was older and wanted to leave a full-time job to study and work part-time, my mother was afraid. Not because she did not believe in me, but because everything inside her had been wired around one truth since she was young. Security is fragile. Do not let go of what you have. The ground can shift at any moment. That fear was what made it very difficult for her to support my decision to leave a full-time job, work part-time, and study full-time. And I understand that now in a way that I could not at that point understand. I also never saw my mother rest, not completely. Not the kind of rest where you put everything down and trust that it will still be there when you pick it up again. This was not something she knew how to do, and so I did not learn it either. I spent nearly 50 years on this earth before I saw it in myself. I had achieved. Materially, educationally, I kept moving and building and reaching, kept striving. And from the outside, it looked like success. But the striving came at a cost. Deep relationships with family and friends The ability to be truly present was absent. The capacity to receive love without immediately converting it into something I could give back. I couldn't just receive love for the sake of receiving it. I felt I needed to earn it, to give back. Because I was also the older child. And I learned from a very young age that the responsibility was mine, or so I thought in my young mind. That giving was mine, receiving was not something that came naturally because it had never really been modeled as something I was allowed to do. I did not connect any of this until I went through one of the most painful experiences of my life. A relationship that didn't work and that stripped away every layer of defense I had built and forced me to look at myself with complete honesty. This was a narcissistic relationship. I find it difficult to label people because I think that it's not our. It's a bit difficult to say something so outright or to believe something so strongly about somebody else unless you have evidence, unless you are sure and your perception is based on those facts and that evidence that this or the person you with might happen to be a narcissist. And I only discovered that from reading many books and from trying to understand my situation. One of the difficulties was that majority of the time it's men who are the narcissists. And that was the other difficulty because I couldn't figure out what was happening. And eventually I had my light bulb moment and I realized it. And the reason I deviate here to mention this is because as painful as it is when a narcissist enters your life, it is also the most transforming relationship you might encounter. Because it's the one relationship where it forces you to look within yourself. It can become so it's strange because in that toxic relationship and environment you start to question things, and you normally wouldn't do this in a stable, happy environment. And so I want to go as far as saying that if we can identify it, in many ways a narcissist can really help you to grow and evolve. If you are able to break free from the relationship, heal from the relationship, then you'll be able to see how much you have learned from it. And it was that very relationship that triggered the healing process in me as a person. And like I said, I will do a full episode on that because it deserves its own space. But what I will say here is this: when the pain lifts and the fog clears from that kind of relationship, you realize that as devastating as it was, it came to show you something about yourself that nothing else could have. It came to make you evolve. And what it showed me was a trail that led all the ways back to what I'd inherited before I was old enough to choose it. There were many, many habits and traits and behaviors in me that was inherited. I didn't ask for it. So what is intergenerational trauma? What exactly is it? In her book, Break the Cycle, I will recommend that if you are looking to deal with intergenerational trauma, to read Dr. Meryl Bouquet. Dr. Meryl Bouquet's book, Break the Cycle, which I have read and which has helped me. And I think that her definition articulates it very well. She describes intergenerational trauma as the transmission of unhealed emotional wounds from one generation to the next. not through conversation, not through deliberate teaching, but through behavior, nervous system responses, survival patterns, and the unspoken rules that get absorbed simply by growing up in a particular environment. And you also didn't ask to be born in that environment. That is why I always say be kind to yourself. Because not everything you have inherited was because of some misdeed of yours. Or think about it in this way. Your parents did not sit you down and say, here is how to be afraid. Here is how to never ask for help. Here is how to work yourself into the ground because rest is dangerous. Here is how to give everything you have to other people and call it love. They did not teach you those things in words, but you learnt them anyway because you watched, you absorbed, you adapted to the emotional climate of the home you grew up in. And the home your parents grew up in was shaped by the home their parents grew up in. And so the pattern travels, it continues. Generation to generation, carried in the body, in the nervous system, in the way we instinctively respond to fear, to love, to loss, and to change. Research has shown that trauma can actually alter the way our genes are expressed. Not change the genes themselves, but change whether certain genes are switched on or off. This is called epigenetics. And it means that the stress your grandmother lived through and the fear your mother carried, the survival your family needed, can show up in your body and your behavior, even if you experienced those original circumstances yourself. Even if you have never experienced them yourself, they will still show up in your body. You are not imagining it, you are not weak, you are not broken. You are in many cases living out a script that was written before you were even born, before you arrived. The Bible understood this long before science gave it a name. Exodus 20 verses 5 speaks of the sin of the fathers before being visited upon the children to the third and fourth generation. Now this is not about punishment. It is about pattern. It is about the reality that what goes unhealed in one generation does not disappear. It travels, it looks for a new body to live in, a new life to express itself through, until somebody decides to break the cycle. And I have decided to do that. I've seen the patterns, I've identified it in myself, I've identified it from previous generations being passed down, and I was able to break it. So why does it happen? Why does the human being carry what it never personally experienced? Because we are wired for survival before we are wired for healing. A child growing up in a home where a parent is anxious about money learns very quickly that money is dangerous. Not because anyone said so, but because the body of the parent communicated it. The tension, the silence around certain subjects, the way breath changed when bills arrived. The child's nervous system fills all the way as truth. So the child accepts all of that as truth, keeps all of that within as truth. A child who was the responsible one, the older one, the one who held things together, learns to give before they learn to receive. And then they spend decades wondering why intimacy feels uncomfortable, why being cared for makes them anxious, why they always know how to show up for everyone else but struggle to let anyone fully show up for them. These are not character flaws, they are adaptations, intelligent, creative, necessary adaptations to the environment that you grew up in. The problem is not that the environment changed and the adaptations did not. You are no longer a child. The original threat is no longer present in the same way. But the nervous system does not know that. It is still running on all the old programs that it's used to. still responding to the old danger, still protecting you from something that happened to someone else in a different time and place. Proverbs 22 verse 6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old enough, he will not depart from it." That verse is usually quoted as a promise about faith, and it is. But it is also a description of how deep early formation goes. What we are trained in, even informally, even without anyone intending it, stays with us. It becomes the operating system underneath everything else. At this point, you are probably also thinking it's a little unfair because you didn't ask for any of this. You were just born into it and you were absorbing up the environment without even knowing it. And then it presents so many challenges and problems to you as an adult. So what are the practical steps that we can do to overcome this? Here are 5 steps to begin the work. 5 steps that I used to help myself. And that's why I can guarantee you, if you follow the 5 steps, it is bound to work. It worked for me. I eventually came out on the other side after a lot of pain and commitment to the pain of healing. The first thing, which is step 1, name it without shame. The first thing you have to do is identify the pattern and trace it back honestly. Not to blame your parents or your grandparents. They were doing what they knew with what they had, but to understand the origin. So you're not blaming them, you're just trying to figure out where it has come from. Ask yourself, where did I learn this? Not intellectually, emotionally. Who modeled this for me? What did I absorb by watching the people I grew up around me? You cannot release what you have not identified, and you cannot heal what you are still pretending is not there. You have to acknowledge it. You have to bring it into the light. Step 2, separate what is yours from what was handed to you. This is one of the most liberating steps in the entire process. Because the moment you can say this fear is not mine, this pattern is not mine, this way of relating was given to me before I had a choice, something in you will shift. You stop identifying the patterns as your personality. You start seeing it as something you inherited. And inherited things can be returned. They can be laid down. They do not have to define who you are in this present time. Romans 12 verses 2 says this, "Be renewed by the transformation of your mind." The mind can be renewed. The pattern is not permanent because the mind can be renewed. I have to be honest with you. Romans 12 verse 2 is a verse that I say to myself quite often, that I'm being transformed in the renewal of my mind and that I'm a brand new creation in Jesus Christ. That helps to reframe how you think, knowing that you're not of the former things. You're not of the former patterns. You're not of the generational trauma, the intergenerational trauma, the pains, the hurts. You're not of those things. You've been set free. Jesus came to set you free, and you're free indeed. And when you go through the healing process and you name it and you work with it, I can guarantee you, you will be set free. And it'll be all worth it in the end. Step 3, grieve what the pattern cost you. This step is one that most people skip, and it is the one that keeps getting them stuck. There is a real loss here. Relationships that were affected, years spent striving when you could have been resting, intimacy that was kept at a distance, time with God that was crowded out by doing, the version of yourself that might have existed if the pattern had been broken one generation earlier, if somebody had chosen to break the patterns. That loss deserves to be honored, not dwelt in endlessly. but acknowledged honestly. Because ungrieved loss does not disappear. It just finds another way to make itself known. I'm going to say that again because it's very important. Ungrieved loss does not disappear. It just finds other ways to make itself known. It's important that you grieve the losses. It's important you acknowledge it, grieve through it, thank it for what it did for you. Whatever comes into my life, I thank it, whether it's good or bad. I thank the experience, and then I let it go. Step 4. Interrupt the pattern in real time. Once you know the pattern, what the pattern is and where it came from, you begin to catch it as it happens. Not perfectly, not immediately, but gradually. If you can start identifying the pattern in yourself, it'll be easier for you to stop yourself and to reroute, to take a different direction or to think differently. But you first have to be able to identify the patterns. The moment you notice yourself striving beyond what is necessary, pause, name it. This is the old program running. This is not who I'm choosing to be. The moment you notice yourself automatically giving without checking whether you have anything left to give, pause. Ask yourself what I actually need right now. The pattern will not disappear overnight, but every time you catch it and choose differently, you are writing new code over the old program. Step 5. Break the cycle with intention. Here is the most important thing I want you to hear. You are not doing this just for yourself. Every pattern you break, every cycle you interrupt, every inherited wound you choose to heal rather than pass on, sends ripples both backward and forward through your lineage. You are healing for yourself. You're not only healing for yourself, but you are healing for the generations that will come after you. And that's very important. I have a nephew who is 5 years old, and now I realize that I have broken the generational curses. And I trust that he will grow up not with the same generational curses that he will have to deal with. Galatians, the Bible calls it redemption, the restoration of what was lost, the turning of what was meant for harm into something that carries life. And the reason that we call this the Rebuild series is because you are rebuilding yourself to who you were meant to be. Before, you were crowded by everything else when you were born and everything that you inherited without even knowing. And the Bible calls it a restoration. And the Rebuild series is saying that if you go through these processes and you deal with this, you will find your true self. Under all those layers, you will find who you truly are, your true authentic self. And from that, you can figure out what was your purpose and plan. But while you are hidden beneath all of this pain and hurt and unhealed parts of you, it'll be very difficult for you to flourish and to find who the core of you is. The close. As I bring this to a close, I want you to know that this is a painful process. And if anybody tells you anything different, I can guarantee you it's not true. It's a painful one. The only thing I can tell you is that you can do it. You are capable of doing it. If I was able to, so can you. I will also suggest that you get help from a higher power. I had help from the Holy Spirit. I had help from the Lord Jesus Christ, who imparted His grace, His strength, and His guidance and mercy to me. And it's only through His grace that I was able to come through it. Not just understanding it is painful, but admitting it as well. Admitting that some of what you have called your personality was actually a survival response. Admitting that the way you have shown up in relationships, in work, in your own inner world, was shaped by things you never chose. That can feel like grief. It can feel like anger. It can feel like the ground shifting underneath you. And some of you are going to find it difficult to even accept that this could be you. That is okay. Do this work when you are ready, not when someone else thinks you should. Not because you feel behind, not because healing has a deadline. I will say this again, only do this when you are ready to make the shift in your own life and to make these big decisions. Because it's painful, and when you start, you want to remain committed to complete the process. So be ready, be prepared when you take on the process of healing and returning to your true self and rebuilding yourself by getting rid of the blockers that stopped you from growing. Give yourself the time and space that's required, because this is not an overnight process. This is a long journey, and the fact that you are here watching this, asking these questions, means you've already taken the most important step. You decided to look. This is where every cycle breaker starts. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 34 verse 18. He saves those who are crushed in spirit. You're not too far gone. You're not too broken. Don't ever think that. It's a lie. You're not too late. That's also a lie. You're exactly where the healing begins. So keep going. Again, I would suggest to you to go back to some of my videos in the first Rebuild series. They help you identify what you need to deal with. It helps you with shame, unforgiveness, conditioning of the mind. It also covers areas where it explains to you why change is so difficult. And this episode was the first episode of the Blocker series, where we are dealing with intergenerational trauma. The next video will deal with another blocker that is normally common among people when they are trying to heal and discover themselves. And that would be in episode 2. There's a free resource in the descriptions. There's a link for it. It's the notes from this video. It's all the notes. It's all the scripture. So if you want something to download and be able to write on or make highlights or use the verses from, please feel free to download the free ebook. And feel free to browse my Ko-fi shop. I have many free resources there. Even if you haven't watched some of the videos, you will have access to the free resources. All of these links are in the description. Again, I want to say thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. I wish you well on this healing journey, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.